There is a lesson that most people spend years resisting, a lesson so simple that it sounds almost disappointing when first heard. Yet hidden inside, it is a kind of freedom that can transform an entire life. The lesson is this: not everyone is meant to stay. People arrive, people leave. Some stay for decades. Some disappear after months. Some promise permanence and vanish without explanation. Others drift away so gradually that you only realize they are gone long after their absence has become a fact. Yet despite this being one of the oldest realities of human existence, most suffering begins when we fight against it. The Stoics understood something that modern society often forgets. Attachment becomes dangerous when it transforms into possession. The moment you begin believing that another person belongs in your life forever, you have silently handed your peace over to forces you cannot control. And what cannot be controlled will eventually disappoint those who try to hold it too tightly. Consider how much energy is wasted chasing explanations. Someone leaves and the mind immediately begins its endless interrogation. What did I do wrong? Could I have said something different? Why did they change? Why wasn't I enough? The mind circles these questions endlessly, not because answers will bring peace, but because uncertainty feels unbearable. Marcus Aurelius faced a similar challenge every day, though not necessarily in matters of love or friendship. As emperor, he watched allies become enemies, trusted companions reveal ambition, and loyal supporters disappear when circumstances changed. Yet he repeatedly reminded himself of a fundamental truth. Human beings act according to their own perceptions, desires, fears, and limitations. Their actions belong to them. Your response belongs to you. This is the dichotomy of control, perhaps the most powerful principle in all of Stoicism. Some things depend upon us, some things do not. Your character belongs to you, your choices belong to you, your discipline belongs to you. Another person's loyalty does not. Their affection does not. Their opinions do not. Their decision to stay or leave does not. The tragedy is not that people leave. The tragedy is that many spend years attempting to control what was never theirs to control in the first place. Imagine holding sand in your hand. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. Relationships often follow the same pattern. Fear creates grasping. Grasping creates pressure. Pressure creates distance. Distance eventually creates the very loss that fear was trying to prevent. But there is a deeper truth hidden beneath this observation. When someone leaves your life, they reveal something important. They reveal reality, not the reality you wished for, not the reality you imagined, not the future you constructed inside your mind. They reveal what is actually true, and reality, even when painful, is always more valuable than illusion. Most people fear abandonment because they confuse presence with value. They believe that if someone chooses to leave, their own worth must somehow decrease. But this assumption collapses under examination. A person's departure says far more about their path than about your value. The sun does not lose its brightness because someone closes their curtains. A mountain does not lose its strength because travelers choose another road. Your worth was never dependent upon another person's decision. The Stoics taught that virtue is the only true good. Not popularity, not approval, not companionship, not status. Virtue, character, integrity, wisdom, courage, self-mastery. Think about what this means. If your value comes from your character, then no departure can take it away. If your value comes from your discipline, then no rejection can diminish it. If your value comes from how you govern your own mind, then no absence can make you less complete. Yet people spend years mourning not only the loss of another person, but the loss of an unimagined identity. They do not simply miss the relationship. They miss the version of themselves they thought they would become through that relationship. This is why letting go feels so difficult. You are not merely releasing a person. You are releasing a future, a story, an expectation, and expectations are often heavier than reality itself. Epictetus warned against becoming attached to things as though they were permanent possessions. He compared life to a traveler staying at an inn. You may enjoy the room, you may appreciate the comfort, but you should never forget that eventually the journey continues. The same is true of human connections. Some people are companions for a chapter. Some remain for many chapters. Very few remain for the entire book. This is not cruelty. It is the structure of life itself. The river does not apologize for flowing. Seasons do not apologize for changing. Time does not apologize for moving forward. Why then should people be expected to remain unchanged forever? One of the most powerful forms of suffering comes from demanding permanence from a world built upon change. The wise person learns a different approach. Instead of asking, "How do I make this last forever?" they ask, "How do I appreciate this while it exists?" That shift changes everything. Gratitude replaces desperation. Presence replaces fear. Acceptance replaces resistance. And strangely, the less desperately you cling to people, the healthier your relationships often become. There is another dimension to this lesson that few discuss. When someone leaves, they create space. At first, this space feels empty, uncomfortable, unwanted. The silence feels loud. The absence feels heavy. The familiar routines suddenly expose gaps where another person's presence once existed. Most people rush to fill these spaces immediately. They seek distractions, replacements, noise, anything that prevents them from sitting with the discomfort. But Stoicism teaches something radically different. Do not run from the emptiness. Study it. Because hidden inside that empty space is often a neglected relationship with yourself. Many people become so focused on maintaining connections with others that they abandon their own development. They stop pursuing goals. They neglect discipline. They sacrifice solitude. They lose contact with their deeper purpose. Then, when someone leaves, they are forced to confront a difficult realization. The person they depended upon for meaning is gone, and they no longer know who they are without them. This is why solitude becomes such an essential Stoic practice. Solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is dependence protesting the absence of company. Solitude is strength enjoying the presence of itself. The Stoics regularly withdrew from crowds, not because they hated people, but because they understood that a person who cannot stand alone becomes vulnerable to manipulation, fear, and emotional dependency. If your happiness requires another person's constant presence, then your happiness exists on fragile ground. But if you can cultivate peace within yourself, then relationships become gifts rather than necessities. And gifts can be appreciated without being possessed. There is immense power in becoming comfortable with your own company. The world fears silence because silence exposes truth without constant distractions. You begin hearing your own thoughts. You begin noticing your habits. You begin confronting weaknesses you previously ignored. You begin understanding what genuinely matters. This process is uncomfortable. That is precisely why it is valuable. Growth rarely emerges from comfort. A sword becomes strong through fire. Character becomes strong through adversity. And often the departure of a person becomes one of life's most effective teachers. Not because loss is inherently good, but because loss reveals where attachment has become excessive. The Stoics practiced what is known as negative visualization. They would occasionally imagine losing what they valued, not to become pessimistic, but to become grateful and resilient. By contemplating impermanence, they reduced the shock of change. Modern minds often avoid this practice. They prefer fantasies of permanence. They convince themselves that current circumstances will continue indefinitely. Then reality arrives, and they are devastated by something that was always possible. The Stoic chooses a different path. They recognize from the beginning that every Relationship exists within the boundaries of time. This awareness does not make them colder. It makes them wiser, because when you understand that something is temporary, you stop taking it for granted. You listen more carefully. You appreciate more deeply. You become more present. And if the day arrives when someone leaves, you grieve without being destroyed. There is a profound difference between grief and destruction. Grief is natural. Destruction is attachment, refusing to accept reality. The Stoics never demanded emotional numbness. They were not stone statues pretending not to feel. They experienced sadness, disappointment, and loss like everyone else. The difference was that they refused to add unnecessary suffering through resistance. They understood that pain is often unavoidable, but bitterness is a choice. Resentment is a choice. Endless obsession is a choice. And choices belong within our control. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood sources of power in human life. Silence. When people leave, many feel compelled to chase them, to explain themselves, to defend themselves, to demand closure, to prove their value. But there is a quiet strength in restraint, a strength that most people never develop. The person who constantly reacts becomes predictable, easy to manipulate, easy to provoke. The person who remains composed possesses something far more valuable. Authority over themselves. Strategic silence is not weakness. It is discipline. It is the ability to feel emotional storms without immediately obeying them. It is the ability to experience rejection without abandoning dignity. It is the ability to maintain self-respect even when circumstances invite desperation. History repeatedly demonstrates this principle. Those who possess the greatest inner strength rarely feel compelled to announce it. They do not chase validation. They do not beg for recognition. They do not exhaust themselves convincing others of their worth. Their confidence emerges from character, not applause, and character requires no audience. When someone chooses to leave, allow them the dignity of their decision, not because their departure is pleasant, not because it does not hurt. But because chasing what wishes to depart often costs more than the departure itself. You lose peace, you lose focus, you lose self-respect. And eventually, you lose precious time that could have been invested in your own growth. Time remains the most valuable possession any human being receives. Every day spent obsessing over what is left is a day not spent building what can still be created. The Stoics understood this better than most. They knew that life is short, uncertain, and impossibly precious. Therefore, attention must be guarded carefully. Do not spend years staring at closed doors, while open paths wait patiently before you. The obstacle itself may be the path. The ending you resist may contain the beginning you need, the departure you fear may be creating room for a stronger version of yourself to emerge. There is a moment that arrives after every significant loss. Though many people fail to recognize it when it appears, it comes quietly. The initial shock has faded. The endless replaying of conversations begins to slow. The mind, exhausted from searching for answers, gradually runs out of questions. What remains is a crossroads. One path leads backward, the other leads forward. The backward path is familiar. It invites you to keep reliving old memories, revisiting old wounds, and maintaining emotional loyalty to a version of life that no longer exists. It offers temporary comfort because it feels connected to what was lost. Yet beneath that comfort lies stagnation. The forward path feels uncertain. It demands courage. It asks you to accept that life continues. And for many people, that acceptance feels like betrayal. They believe that moving forward means forgetting. They believe healing dishonors what once mattered. They believe releasing attachment somehow erases the significance of the relationship. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. You honor the past, not by living inside it forever, but by carrying its lessons into the future. A teacher's value is not measured by how long they stand beside you. It is measured by what remains after they are gone. The same principle applies to every meaningful connection. Some people enter your life to teach trust, others teach caution. Some teach patience, others teach boundaries. Some reveal your strengths. Others expose weaknesses you did not know existed. The Stoic asks a different question from most people. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" they ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That single shift transforms suffering into education. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself that obstacles are not interruptions to life, they are life. Every challenge carries within it an opportunity for growth. Every setback contains material that can be transformed into wisdom. This is the essence of amor fati, love of fate. Not passive acceptance, not resignation, love, the willingness to embrace reality exactly as it arrives and use it as fuel for development. Most people misunderstand this concept because they assume loving fate means enjoying every experience. It does not. No one enjoys every hardship. No one welcomes every disappointment. The Stoic simply recognizes that reality has already occurred. Fighting against what has already happened changes nothing. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is clarity. Once reality is accepted, energy can finally be redirected toward productive action. Imagine two people experiencing the same loss. The first spends years arguing with reality. They repeatedly ask why things happened differently than they wanted. They replay every detail. They search endlessly for alternate outcomes that no longer exist. The second person feels the same pain, but accepts the event as fact. They study it, learn from it, grow through it, then gradually redirect their attention toward building a stronger future. The external event is identical. The internal response creates entirely different lives. This is why Stoicism remains so powerful after 2,000 years. Its teachings do not depend upon circumstances. They depend upon perspective, and perspective remains within our control. There is another uncomfortable truth hidden within many departures. Sometimes people leave because they have reached the limit of what they can contribute to your growth. This does not necessarily make them bad people, nor does it make you one. It simply means the relationship has fulfilled its purpose. Nature operates through seasons. Spring does not become summer by accident. Summer does not remain forever. Every phase eventually gives way to another. Human relationships often follow the same pattern. Yet people cling desperately to expired seasons. They attempt to revive what has naturally concluded. They remain emotionally attached to versions of themselves that no longer exist, and in doing so, they miss the opportunities standing directly in front of them. Growth requires space. Transformation requires endings. The person you are becoming may require different environments, different challenges, and different influences than the person you used to be. Consider how often fear disguises itself as loyalty. People remain attached to old relationships, not because those relationships continue serving them, but because uncertainty feels frightening. The familiar becomes preferable to the unknown, even when the familiar is unhealthy, even when it limits growth, even when it prevents transformation. The Stoics understood that courage is not the absence of fear, that courage is acting correctly, despite fear. Sometimes courage means staying, sometimes courage means leaving, and sometimes courage means allowing others to leave without chasing them. That final form of courage is exceptionally rare, because it requires complete trust in yourself. It requires confidence that your future remains valuable regardless of who chooses to accompany you. It requires understanding that your purpose extends beyond any single relationship. The strongest individuals in history possessed this quality. They valued relationships deeply, yet never built their identity entirely upon them. Their foundation existed within. Their direction came from principles. Their confidence emerged from character. As a result, they could experience loss without losing themselves. This brings us to one of the greatest misconceptions about strength. Many assume strength means becoming emotionally detached, but emotional detachment is often just fear wearing a disguise. True strength is different. True strength allows you to care deeply while remaining free. To love without possession. To appreciate without dependence. To connect without surrendering your identity. A tree survives storms because its roots extend deeply into the earth. Likewise, human beings survive emotional storms when their identity extends deeply into values rather than circumstances. If your identity depends upon another person's presence, every departure threatens your stability. If your identity depends upon your own character, stability remains available regardless of external events. This is why the Stoics invested so heavily in self-mastery, not because they wished to isolate themselves from humanity, but because they understood that inner strength creates healthier relationships. People who are desperate for validation often become controlling. People who fear abandonment often become possessive. People who lack inner peace often seek others to compensate for what is missing within themselves. These patterns create suffering for everyone involved. Self-mastery breaks the cycle. When you become comfortable with yourself, relationships become choices rather than necessities. You no longer tolerate disrespect out of fear. You no longer chase unavailable people to prove your worth. You no longer sacrifice principles simply to avoid loneliness. Instead, you operate from abundance rather than scarcity, and abundance changes everything. A person operating from scarcity thinks, if this relationship ends, I lose everything. A person operating from abundance thinks, if this relationship ends, I lose something valuable, but I do not lose myself. That distinction is life-changing because self-respect grows whenever you stop negotiating against your own interests. Every time you maintain your standards despite loneliness, self-respect grows. Every time you choose discipline over desperation, self-respect grows. Every time you refuse to abandon your values for temporary approval, self-respect grows. And self-respect creates a kind of confidence that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or given by another person. It must be earned. The modern world rarely teaches this lesson. Instead, it encourages constant visibility, constant explanation. Constant reaction. People feel pressured to respond to every criticism, defend every decision, and seek approval from every audience. The Stoics would have found this exhausting. They understood the immense power of strategic scarcity. Not everyone deserves access to your thoughts. Not everyone deserves explanations. Not everyone deserves your energy. One of the most powerful things you can do is quietly continue building your life, while others remain distracted by noise. When someone leaves, there is often an urge to prove something. To prove your value. To prove they made a mistake. To prove you can succeed without them. But the deepest form of success requires no audience. A flower does not bloom to convince anyone. The sun does not rise seeking applause. Nature simply fulfills its purpose. Likewise, your task is not to perform for critics or former companions. Your task is to continue developing your character, continue refining your discipline, continue pursuing wisdom. Continue building a life aligned with your highest principles. Whether others notice is irrelevant. Whether others approve is irrelevant. Whether others return is irrelevant. The quality of your character remains the central concern. This realization creates extraordinary freedom. Imagine no longer needing universal approval. Imagine no longer fearing rejection. Imagine no longer measuring your worth through the decisions of others. Most people never experience this freedom because they remain trapped inside social evaluation. They constantly ask, what do they think of me? The Stoic asks a different question. What do I think of my own conduct? That question restores power because your conduct remains within your control. Opinions do not. Reputations do not. Outcomes do not. Conduct does. And when conduct becomes your primary focus, life becomes simpler. Not easier. Simpler. You stop wasting energy managing perceptions. You stop exhausting yourself chasing validation. You stop surrendering peace to unpredictable external events. Instead, you direct attention toward the one domain where genuine influence exists. Your own mind, your own actions, your own character. Perhaps that is the hidden power of letting people leave. It is not merely about losing someone. It is about discovering what remains when they are gone. What remains is your discipline. What remains is your resilience. What remains is your capacity for growth. What remains is your ability to transform pain into wisdom. What remains is the person staring back at you in moments of solitude. And if that person is strong, thoughtful, disciplined, and guided by principles, then no departure can truly impoverish you. Life will continue bringing arrivals and departures. Some people will exceed your expectations, others will disappoint you. Some will remain longer than expected. Others will vanish sooner than you imagined. This pattern is unlikely to change, but your relationship with it can. You can spend your life resisting reality, demanding permanence from an impermanent world, or you can embrace the Stoic path. Appreciate what arrives, learn from what remains, release what leaves. And continue walking forward with dignity, because the ultimate measure of strength is not how tightly you hold on. It is how gracefully you let go. The person who leaves takes only their presence. They cannot take your wisdom. They cannot take your discipline. They cannot take your character. They cannot take the lessons forged through adversity. Those remain yours. And in the end, those are the possessions that matter most. So when someone chooses to leave, let them go. Not with bitterness. Not with resentment. Not with desperation. Let them go with understanding. Let them go with gratitude for whatever chapter was shared. Let them go with the quiet confidence that your path remains meaningful. Then return your attention to the only life you are responsible for living, your own. Build it carefully, guard it wisely, strengthen it daily. And one day you will realize that what once felt like an ending was actually an invitation. An invitation to become stronger than your attachments, wiser than your disappointments, calmer than your fears, and freer than you ever thought possible.